want to welcome you to the C-Suite Briefing. Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
One more time. Good morning, everyone. Thank you. Welcome to the C-Suite Briefing. First, I'd like to introduce myself. My name is Corey Halbardier. I'm with the SBA Network. And we'd like to thank our sponsors. Our sponsors today are Fifth Wave Leadership, SBA Network, and the Employers Group. We're going to hear two presentations today. The first one is from Morrie Shechtman, and then the second one is Mark Dio. Let me tell you a little bit about Morrie. Morrie is the chairman of Fifth Wave Leadership. He's a sought-after speaker in regards to personal transformation and performance improvement. He spoke in the United States, Canada, Mexico, I have to go through the list here, Latin America, Europe, Africa, Australia, and New Zealand. He's consulted with hundreds of top executives worldwide, managing disruptive change and merging corporate culture. He's authored 2 books. Actually, they're both right here. Working Without a Net, How to Survive and Thrive in Today's High-Risk Business World, and Fifth Wave Leadership, The Internal Frontier, which examines the connection between personal growth and bottom-line productivity. He's been interviewed on Good Morning America. What a resume, huh? Good Morning America, as well as being a frequent guest on PBS and a number of other radio talk shows. Many political figures consider Morrie to be one of the most influential minds in our generation on strategies for thriving in today's high-risk business world. As we prepare to welcome Morrie to the stage, let's spend a few minutes watching a video titled Did You Know, that leads into his talk. Enjoy.
brand new workforce, and we need to make shifts in how we work with them. So what I want to talk to you about this morning is 5 essential shifts that need to be made to accommodate the new world that we live in. We can't manage and run organizations the way we used to because we don't have the same people working for us, and their experiences are going to be radically different than our experiences have been. So I want to go through some of these shifts with you, and if you have a burning question while I'm going through, by all means feel free to raise that question. Otherwise, I'll leave some time at the end for some individual questions. So let's look at these shifts that we need to make. There we go. Whoops. There are 2 dual challenges that we need to be aware of. One has to do with the fact that information first and foremost, and that's the biggest change agent in all our lives. First thing it does is raise expectations for everybody. Raises expectations for consumers, for customers. It raises expectations for our workers. And what it does is create a lot of conflict. I'll talk more about that in just a moment. But the first thing we have to deal with is a more challenging customer base. And that creates people who need to be able to handle challenges and not handle consensus all the time. Second thing it does is change what the workforce comes to work to do. I can't make this point clear enough, is we now live in a post-survival culture. First time in the history of the species. What does that mean? It means that people don't get up in the morning any longer worried about the roof over their head or what they're going to eat in the evening. What they come to work to do is to learn. I need to really emphasize that. We now have a culture in which people live to learn. If your working site is not a learning site, you'll have a migratory workforce. And absolutely essential that you look at what are your people learning every single day. And we'll talk more about that as we go through the material. But this is a post-survival culture. The reason people get up, they may not be able to articulate it, but the reason they get up in the morning is to learn something about the rest of the world or about themselves. Those are our challenges. There we go. Shift number 1 that I want to talk about is from conflict avoidance to conflict management. I want to emphasize here that conflict management is the number 1 skill your people are going to need. And conflict avoidance involves putting you into denial. And as I wrote in my first book, denial is the killer of business. Denial creates chaos, creates corruption, and creates constant crises to deal with. The biggest threat to business is not the marketplace. It's internal denial of your problems. And if you have conflict avoiders working for you, they will bring you down faster than anything else, particularly in the culture that we live in now. So we have to shift from conflict avoidance to conflict management. What is conflict management about? It's about dealing with problems in real time and working toward resolution, not perfection. There's a question we ask our clients all the time: would you rather be right or would you rather be effective? Conflict avoiders are often people that have to be perfect about everything. We now live in the time where the worst thing possible is to be a perfectionist. Because if you're waiting for all the information to be assembled before you make a decision, you will be in denial before you know it. So this is an essential shift from conflict avoidance to conflict management. What do you do in your organizations to teach your people to effectively manage conflict? What do you do in your organizations to support conflict avoidance? So that's a question you all need to be asking yourself, because conflict avoidance is deadly. Part of this shift is to realize the difference between conflict and hostility. We don't have many healthy role models for managing conflict in our culture. We don't grow up by and large in families that do. We don't grow up in communities that help us understand what healthy conflict is about. Conflict is simply the expression of anger, which is the expression of disappointment. I'll talk more about anger specifically, but I want to differentiate here between 2 concepts. Conflict is good, healthy, has to do with the expression of disappointment. Hostility is something radically different. Hostility is a general accusation, universal accusation, from which there is no redemption. That is, you can't make it better because it's about everything you do and everything you are. So understand the difference here is very, very important. Conflict is very critical, and it is the expression of disappointment. Again, we don't have a lot of healthy models for this. What's important about this is that all relationships at one point or another are disappointing and need to be disappointing if they're going to grow. If you avoid expressing disappointment, you write people's potential off for growth and development. So the conflict is ultimately an expression and a vote of confidence. So you must express disappointment if you want people to grow and you want relationships to grow. That's all conflict is the expression of that disappointment and the resolution of that disappointment through negotiation and compromise. I keep that very different than hostility. And hostility is a very distancing behavior. What people don't know about hostile people is that what they seek is isolation and abandonment, because that's what they grew up with and that's what they know how to reproduce. So anger and productivity. The expression of anger leads people to be highly productive. Anger is ultimately nothing more than the ability to act in your own behalf by first expressing that disappointment. If you can express that disappointment, then you can be assertive. Once you're assertive, you can plan, and when you plan, you get results. If you're shut down on expressing disappointment, i.e. expressing anger, you will be a victim or a person who victimizes other people. So very important to get the connection between anger and productivity. And again, anger being associated with conflict tends to get a negative valence in our culture. If your people don't have a healthy sense of anger, they won't act in their own behalf and won't ultimately act in your behalf. Disappointment, as I said earlier, is absolutely critical to growth and development. Without that disappointment, there's no growth and no development taking place. Folks, come on in, join us here. There's seats here, there's a few seats over there, but hate to see you standing there. I like the idea of standing room only crowds, but better that you sit down. Come on, join us. Yeah, it's okay, don't worry about it. You can walk behind the screen. Great. Good to have you here. So disappointment is a catalyst for growth, and again, a vote of confidence in people. And I really want to emphasize this because of the politically correct times we live in, that it absolutely killed this notion here. We now live in a time where if you express disappointment in anyone, you've shattered their fragile psyches. It's absolutely nonsense and been very depreciating and patronizing to people. Withholding disappointment is what is shattering to people. You understand that if you want someone to grow, you never tell them you're disappointed in them. You have no right to complain about the results. And what we see in our work time and time again is people complaining about the people that work for them, how they don't deliver this, they don't deliver that. And our first question is, have you ever told them you're disappointed in their performance? Oh, well, no, I don't want to hurt their feelings. You know, and we have a saying in our work, would you rather have an employee have a bad weekend or a bad life? No one's going to die from getting some disappointing news. They will grow almost 99% of the time. And withholding that disappointment is cruel and unusual punishment. Stop doing it if that's the way you've been operating. That is no gift to people. In fact, it's a liability for them and for you. Shift number 2, from training to development. Training is great, an absolute necessity in high change times. But understand that training is about learning about the external world, which you certainly have to learn about, no doubt about that. But the first step is training. It is not the last step. It is not the final step, nor is it simply an ongoing step. The challenge of our time is to move to development, which is about the internal world. Your companies are going to succeed because you have better people than the competition, not simply because you have better products or a better service delivery system. What information has done is level the playing field in terms of information, in terms of product, and in terms of service. So that's what information has done. So the only market differentiator now is your people. Developing your people is the key to success. Developing your people is about giving them information about who they are. We call it self-information. The future in our culture is going to go to the self-informed. It is not going to go to the smarter or the harder working. I really want to emphasize that. If your people are opaque about who they are, they won't deliver the results for you. That is, if they don't know why they do what they do every day, they won't be effective and productive. So development is about expanding, dramatically expanding the self-information of yourself and the people that work with you. That's the key to success that we've seen. Now, we need to look at closing a gap here, a huge gap. We have an enormous gap now in the workplace between typical managers and typical workers. And these are admittedly generalizations. There are going to be exceptions to this. The typical manager working now in a typical company understands how to supervise people. And what I mean by that is they know how to give orders, have people say they're going to do it, and then make sure they do it, that supervision. The typical worker now bristles against that whole concept. Typical worker now resists anything that looks like control and either passively resists or engages in what we call malicious compliance. You know, I'll do it, but I'll hate you while I'm doing it. That's not an effective posture to have. We need to close the gap between a supervisor, the manager who only understands supervision, and a worker who bristles against control. And we need to close this gap because we have people with radically different life experiences working together. The typical manager now grew up in a fairly hierarchical, quasi-authoritarian background where you did what you were told, and if you did it, you succeeded, and if you didn't, you probably didn't succeed. So very, very critical to understand that. The typical worker grew up in an environment with very limited life experience, stayed in things like school for a long period of time, and is by and large delayed in their development. Okay? So what do I mean by delayed in their development? I mean all the developmental stages we grew up with, most of us grew up with, are a good 10 years postponed. And understand that life experience grows up and matures people, not school. Okay? So the longer you stay in schooling, the more knowledge and information you may have, the less you are along on developmental scale. So let me give you a practical example of that. We have traditionally seen adolescence as occurring between 13 and 19 years old. It now occurs between 20 and 30 years old in America. That's the adolescent period. So what does that mean? It means that we have people working for us very often who are very bright, very articulate, and look the part and feel like 14 and 15-year-olds. You know, one of the most common things we hear from managers in our clients, I feel like I go to work every day and I'm a babysitter. We say, you're not a babysitter, but you are rearing children at work. There's no doubt about that, and you better learn how to do it more effectively. And if you keep your rigid stance of, they're going to do what I tell them to do or else, it'll be or else most of the time. And you won't be effective in your work. Both parties have to grow. And you have a challenge at both ends of this spectrum. Because the life experience delta is dramatic at this point. Between people who are managing and people who are working have radically different life experiences. All you need to do is ask yourself, if you're 40, 50, 60, even a little younger, what were you doing at 21, 22 years old, and what life experiences did you have compared to a peer group now of the same age? Radically different life experiences. That creates very different attitudes toward work and very different challenges to deal with. So I really want to emphasize this gap is huge. And you need to work on closing that gap if you want to have a productive workforce. Engaging the workforce. We need now an engaged workforce, not people who do routine work over and over again. An engaged workforce means there's an emotional connection between you and the people you work for. And engagement's absolutely essential. The days are over where people will do work for combat pay, do lousy, boring work for a little more money. There has to be an emotional connection. There has to be a level of engagement we haven't seen before in the workforce. And that's fed to a great, great degree by this concept of feedback. Understand that we grew up in a time where we feel we have the right to all the information that's out there. And the internet has simply supported that and made that a huge issue in our lives. You cannot now have people working for you who get little or no information and little or no feedback about who they are and how they're doing. If you withhold feedback now in a company, what do you think the assumption of the workers is going to be? If they know little or nothing about what's going on. I'll tell you exactly what it is. You're screwing them. That may or may not have anything to do with the reality. That's the perception. Because people now feel they have a right to information, and they have a right to all the information. So if you're opaque as opposed to transparent, the book on you will be, you've got something up your sleeve that's not good for them. Feedback's absolutely essential. People need to know how they're doing now on a regular, ongoing basis. They need to know what they're doing well, excellently. They need to know what they're struggling with and what their challenges are and what you expect them to change. If you want an engaged workforce, you're going to have to dramatically increase the level of feedback that you have. And I don't mean long, agonizing conversations. I mean short interactions where they get feedback very quickly and they ask if they understand it. If they understand it, time to move on. But they need that feedback on a regular, ongoing basis. That's part of the culture we live in now. Shift number 3, from what I call harassment to accountability. Harassment is a demand for results with no relationship. That's what harassment is. And again, this speaks back to the gap I was talking about earlier. We now have, by and large, managers who understand how to harass and pester people. They don't understand how to hold them accountable. And what I mean by that is they know how to give people ultimatums, or they know how to pick up after people continually and do the work for them. Neither of those is effective accountability. And understand here that effective accountability is relationship driven. Accountability is a development of relationships, the result of which is productive work. The relationship comes first. The productive work comes second. We live in relationship-driven times. They've never been as important as before. Nothing will get done these days in a workplace outside of good, effective relationships. If you don't have relationships with the workforce, they will do the minimal for you, and that's all they're going to do. They'll do the maximal for you if you have great relationships with them. Understand me, great relationships doesn't mean you socialize with them, doesn't mean you give them a better benefit package. Great relationship means you give them feedback and you engage their feelings at work, not just their thoughts. If you don't engage their feelings, there's not going to be the depth of relationship to get the kind of accountability that you want to get. So we're talking about moving from a non-relationship, task-oriented view of work to a relationship-driven, productive work focus. Huge, huge shift for most organizations. So harassment is simply about numbers and ultimatums. If all you do is tell people, do these 3 things or you're out of here, they'll be out of there very often. And you'll have a revolving door of employees getting hired and fired on a regular basis. So it is not, we're not talking here about simply ultimatums and numbers. What we are talking about here is engagement and relationships. Again, the engagement is about feelings, and the relationship is about feedback and dialoguing. One critical point here is watch how much you or the people that work in your companies dialogue versus mutual monologuing. Most of our culture now is about mutual monologuing. If you next time you turn on the television and see an interview on TV, watch if there's any connection between the interviewer's questions and the interviewee's answers. You will rarely find any connection at all. The typical TV interview now is like a psychotic interaction. Question A is asked, answer C is given, question T is asked, and it just goes on and on and on with no connection whatsoever. I'm a former psychotherapist. It reminds me of my days on a locked ward when I was an intern, watching psychotic conversations. Is watching a typical TV interview. There's no connection. Watch very clearly if you dialogue with people and you actually use segues. We talk about segues in our work, and people don't know what in the world we're talking about. Not only can't they spell it, they have no idea what it is. If you're going to dialogue with people, a segue means that the first thing out of your mouth connects with the last thing the person said. And when we tell people that, they act like, what a radical idea. What an unbelievable idea. You mean what I say should actually connect with what the person just said? Yeah, it really helps build relationships. It's amazing. You ought to try it sometime. Because what you'll find in the workforce is people are simply waiting for you to stop talking so that they can talk. That does not build relationships. And then it impairs the already low-level listening in our culture. I mean, I am blown away with the conversations I have every single day. I fly almost every week of my life somewhere in the world. And I'll talk to a reservations person and I'll say, is flight 454 on time? What do you think the first question is? What flight number are you calling about? It's like, was I talking into the Milky Way galaxy here? Where were you? All right, shift number 4, from professional to personal. What I mean here is that you need to get over this notion that you want to lead or you want your employees to lead balanced lives. Nothing is worse at this point for you than try to lead a balanced life. You will be sick more often, you will be unproductive, and you will burn out real fast. Our times are not about balance, they are about blending. Right now, your challenge is to understand that information has created a fully integrated universe, and you can't live compartmentalized lives anymore and be healthy and productive. Balance is about compartmentalizing your life between work and home. All that will do is have you live with a predominant emotion in our society now, which is guilt. You try to lead a balanced life, what are you going to be feeling all the time? When you're at work, what are you going to be feeling? Should be at home. When I'm at home, there's a project at work. You understand that our lives now are about getting all the lines down between work and home and leading blended, fully integrated lives, which means you can do work stuff at home and home stuff at work. And you have to have the same value system in both areas of your life. So we need to make a move from this notion there is professional life and there is personal life to really focusing on the fact you are one person all the time. And you'll have the same values, you'll have the same behaviors, the same attitudes, and we need to take advantage of that as opposed to seeing that as an intrusion. Now, the demand that makes on you is to set boundaries and limits about what you want to do where. Puts the burden more on the individual than on the collective group. Right. So, all business is personal. I want to really emphasize this. And I say it may be obvious in some ways, it's not obvious in other ways. All business is personal. So we sit in groups a lot. We run a lot of groups in the corporate work that we do. And we'll see someone look at a colleague and say, I want to give you some feedback, but I don't want you to take this personally. This is not personal. And I'm sitting there thinking, unless he's talking to an android, I don't know how else it's going to be taken. I want it to be taken personal. What happens is we confuse personal with hostile. Personal is caring and concerned about your growth and development. If it's impersonal, why would I give you any feedback at all? So don't confuse personal with hostile. I'm not giving you feedback to attack you. I'm giving you feedback to help you grow. It is deeply personal. You depersonalize business, you will slow people's growth and development down, and you will plateau as a company. It is all personal. You have people working with you and for you. They're not robots. So this is about deeply personalizing business and getting away from that nonsense that we have grown up with, that this is business, has nothing to do with our personal life. We need to effectively bring down the firewall. Get rid of this nonsensical division between personal and business life. All the same, and that in fact is to all our advantage to do that. Okay, shift number 4, recruiting. Let me see. No, it's part of the fourth one, sorry, is this notion of recruiting. Recruiting, from what to who? A critical point here. In this culture where, as you saw from the introductory program, we don't know what people are going to be doing from year to year, we're hiring talent, we're not hiring jobs. And what this means is it's who you're hiring that's important, not what they've done because what they have done may not be what they end up doing for you. And they may end up being hired to do one thing and end up doing 5 things while they're with you. This is about hiring who people are. Can't emphasize that enough. So what we're talking about here is looking at the value characteristics, the interpersonal characteristics of the people that are in front of you. Very, very different view of before. This is not about the resume. Right? This is about the gut reaction of who people are. We have a saying in our work that you get hired for what you know, you always get fired for who you are. Right? You get hired for what you know, you get fired for who you are. Nobody loses their job because they get suddenly stupid and forget how to do it. Every termination is about a personal issue that was neglected that came out in work performance. Every single termination is about that. We've been involved in lots of them. It is not about someone forgetting how to work a machine. It is always who they are. So we've got to be looking at who they are. So what's the implication of this? Is that interviews are about seeing if there's a value match between you and the company, and what are the core beliefs and attitudes of the person sitting in front of you. So the new interview is about finding a values match, about assessing a person's ability to develop a relationship, very, very, very critical, and about replicating the most challenging parts of the job in the interview. Right now, the interview we see in our clients, the typical job interview is less effective than a dartboard. And I say that because it finds out very little about the candidate, very, very little, and maybe a modicum about what they do. So I want to emphasize this last point. Does your interviewing replicate the most challenging parts of the job that you're hiring someone to do at the current time, and the most challenging parts of the culture they're entering into? Is that replicated in the interview? So, for example, if you're hiring someone and they're going to handle a lot of conflict situations, is there conflict in the interview? Did they get feedback in the interview that generates any conflict? If there's a contradiction in the interview, do you confront it or do you let it go? Interviews are not about making people feel comfortable, nor are they about selling positions. Interviews are about assessing the individual on a number of key indicators. Don't make your interviews a sales job, and don't make them comfortable, and don't look for consensus and agreement. Look for how people handle the tough stuff in an interview, not the easy stuff. Fifth shift, from goals to values. We have focused a lot of work and business on people achieving goals, and we absolutely agree with that. That's important to have goals. What's equally or more important is to make clear that they have the values you need to run the company you want to run. Okay. Very, very critical. Let me distinguish between the two. Goals are where you're going with your business and with your personal life. Values are how you're going to get there. Values always trump goals. Because if you don't have a value match, you will string out and make much more arduous the achievement of your goals. The values that come first and foremost, then you look at the goals. Most organizations confuse their values and their goals. Right. So when we ask them what their values are, what we really hear are their goals. And then we hear some very flowery, patronizing, cliched things about values that have nothing to do with core values. I'll talk about it in a moment. So what are the characteristics of values? First, let me define value for you very quickly. A value is a belief system about how the world ought to be. It is not a belief system about how the world currently is or how it was. Values are a belief system about how the world ought to be. And it's somewhat like the concept of infinity. You're always working toward it and never quite get there. Values have a number of characteristics. Number one, values force you to make a decision between two or more viable alternatives. If it's a value, it must force a decision. You can't be indecisive if you claim that a certain thing you believe is a value. It forces you to make a decision. Number two, it is intrinsically polarized. It's a polarizing statement. It is either or. You can't be in the middle with the value. So you can't have a somewhat integrity, a little bit of integrity. You either have integrity or you don't. So the value is polarized and needs to be polarized to be effective. And again, it's difficult to have a clear value statement in this politically correct time because, God forbid, you take a position on anything, you might offend somebody. And that's why we have some of the chaos we have in our culture now. If you don't take positions in running a business, your business will soon be in trouble. It is your job to do that. Okay? Number 3, values are situationally neutral. It is irrelevant what the situation is. Situations never determine values. There are no situational ethics and situational values. Regardless of the situation, it is or it isn't. Number 4, it's personally neutral. The people involved are irrelevant to the situation when it comes to values. This is particularly important in closely held businesses and particularly family businesses. Number 1 reason family businesses get into trouble is because family members are exempt from the values. Don't run a family business unless you're ready to apply the values to every member of the family, without any exceptions at all. And don't run a closely held business if you have favorites that are untouchable. That will hurt everybody in the business sooner or later. 5th and final characteristic of values, they are unambiguous and incapable of further definition. So if it's a value, there's no doubt in anybody's mind what the statement means. Let me give you a practical example of that. A lot of the companies we work with say that family is a very important value for the business. And we say to them is family is a great goal, it is not a value. And why isn't family a value? Because if I ask 15 people what family means, I'll get 14 definitions. What most people mean by family is commitment to relationships. That may be a value. Family itself is a goal, not a value. When you look at the values in your company, in your organizations, really ask yourself, are you talking about your core unambiguous beliefs, or are you talking about goals that you have in the organization? They can be very different. Necessity of values alignment. Can't emphasize this enough. It is your obligation to impose your values on the organization. We are asked very often, do I have the right to impose my values on employees? To really demand that these are the values that they have? And we say, you don't have the right, you have the obligation to do it. Because if you don't impose those values, you are shortcutting and screwing your employees who show up every day to model your values. Values alignment is a 100% issue. This is not a 90%er or an 80%er. You identify your values, and the only choice people have in an organization is they believe those values or they leave. If you don't do that, you have what we call paid saboteurs in your company. There's people who get well paid to buck everything you need to get done. And we sit in meetings all the time where we'll see a management team get together, and one person is always objecting to everything that needs to get done in the company. At the end of the meeting, we ask the CEO and the owner, how long has that person been here? So, he's been here 10, 15 years, always had that same attitude. And we say, how do you like paying someone to cut your throat and be on your team? This is crazy. Values alignment is an all or nothing issue. No effective human organization has ever existed with a mix of values. You understand that? The strength of American culture is not that we are a melting pot of values. We are a melting pot of styles. We are the most value homogenous culture in the face of the earth. And if you don't travel a lot, you wouldn't appreciate that. Go anywhere else in the world and you will see what a mix of values creates. It is a nightmare. It is a political, economic, and social nightmare to have a mix of values. So I really want to emphasize here, it is your obligation to impose values on your organization. They come from the top. They are not voted on. This is not democratic. Okay, whoops. Good. So I've gone through the shift, and I want to emphasize here, these are not easy shifts to make. But I want to tell you that what's difficult about making these shifts is not the new ideas. It's the getting rid of the old ones. You know, we found in our work, the most successful people we work with regularly give up what they do well. Understand that. Successful people are ready to regularly give up what they've done well and adopt something more effective. So the difficulty lies not in the new ideas, but in escaping from the old ones. Thanks very much for listening. I hope it's been helpful to you. And I'd be glad to take a few questions. We've got a few minutes. What kind of question? Yes, back there. You're trying to get you the mic there so that other people can hear it.
I have a question about job interview. What specific questions do you ask?
Great question. I forgot to mention. I'll repeat that for you. In terms of job interviewing, what are some effective questions you can ask to really see if there's a value match between yourself and the candidate? Great question. Let me give you a couple. And these are not questions that you ask as soon as someone sits down. You establish some rapport with them, and then once that rapport is established, great question. Up till today's date, what have been the two most significant losses in your life? It is a phenomenal question for getting at core beliefs. The follow-up questions are, what did you learn from those losses, and how did they change you for the rest of your life? Now, why do we ask about losses? Because losses are the crucible within which your values are created. You don't know what you really believe from what you gain. You know exactly what you believe when you lose something. Because then the question is, who am I now and what's important to me? So that's a great question. Up to today's date, what have been the two greatest losses in your life? What did you learn from them? And how did they fundamentally change you? Another question. Up to today's date, what have been the two most stressful experiences in your life? Same follow-up question. Stresses may be losses, they may not be losses particularly. But again, values are created in the stressful moments, not in the moments where everything has gone well. Right. Third question is, describe to me the last experience you had of engaging in a conflict at work or in your personal life. What was the conflict about and how did it get resolved? Conflict, again, goes to the issue of core values and what you're willing to take a position on. I can anticipate the next question, which is, are these legally permissible to ask? Absolutely. They've been vetted by the #1 employment law firm in California. And if you can pass employment law muster in California, you can pass it anywhere in the galaxy. So they have been vetted. They are permissible. They violate no laws by asking us questions. Does that help with that? Good. There was another question back there. Yeah, Brad.
Morrie, can you distinguish between the old mission statement method and can you distinguish between the old mission statement method and the value system, core value system now?
Sure.
Is there still a place in the business for a mission statement?
Yeah, absolutely. I think there clearly is a role for mission, but I would say that mission really relates more to your goals, to the end you want to achieve. And the difference is that the values really tell you and everyone who works for you, how are you going to get there? Because you can have a grand and glorious mission and achieve it in some fairly scurrilous ways and drive away good talent. So watch out for the mission statement being confused with the values. They are very different. Again, the values are the roadmap. Question there, right over here.
What do you do about motivation in terms of you have the dialogue, you do disclose,
right?
You become vulnerable, they share their things, and what you find out is they really have no motivation.
Yeah.
Where do you go with that? Do you just say lost cause and move on to the next person?
That's a great question. I think everyone heard that. Do you have a mic on you?
No, I was an opera singer.
You're an opera singer. Okay. I was wondering where that resonance was coming from there. Motivation's a great question. We don't believe in motivation. Okay? No, I don't motivate anybody to do anything. I leave that to deities. I mean, that's like raising the dead. If, trying to motivate people. What we do believe in is that almost everyone has a drive to grow and learn, and what we call unmotivated people are people who've never been given information and feedback to spark their need to grow and learn. And our experience is, when we work, a lot of people say, oh, you'll never motivate him. Start giving them feedback about their impact on us and on the world, and boy, all of a sudden the motivation is there. Okay? Motivation is not this goofy kind of thing you see on bad infomercials. Motivation is a desire to learn and grow, and I've not met, I can't remember meeting anyone the last time who had no desire to learn and grow. Now, poorly articulated very often, but that is changed by the level of feedback you give them. Okay? Let's take one more question or so. Any others? Yes?
I find the biggest problem is getting people, find people. And if you call it managers,
Yeah.
either the manager has a real good job and is treated well and is staying there, or a lot of the managers are moving on to running their own business. How would you recommend as far as finding people?
Finding people means that you've got to have a bigger flow. The question is it's difficult to find people, and I would agree, but it is certainly not impossible. And what you have to do is go through a lot of people to get someone, and most of our clients stop at a very few people and then throw up their hands and say, I can't find anybody.
What sources would you use to get people?
Look at it's a great question. What source did you use? That's dependent on the risk level that you're looking for, particularly in managers. And what we're looking for are two characteristics right now in managers: the ability to make decisions and the ability to build relationships.
Well, I'm still saying is to get people to call you to come to the interview.
I don't know that they're going to be calling you.
No, I'm saying is if you're trying to fill a spot,
Right.
what sources would you use to advertising on the internet? I'm talking about getting people to come strictly for the interview itself.
I can address that, but to a great degree. Mark is the guy Mark who? Right. Is a guy to look at this very specific sources. We source people by some industries where we want to get the right kind of people who have the decision-making skills, relationship-giving skills. For example, the hospitality industry right now is the best place to get managers. The hospitality industry, because they have young people who don't last more than a week if they can't make decisions and build relationships. You run a restaurant, you run a hotel, you work at a resort, you're going to have to be a decision maker and a relationship builder, or you're not going to be around real long. So that's a great source for managers right now for a whole lot of our clients. Okay. Good. Anything else before we close this? Questions, concerns? Okay, great talking to you.
I have a question.
Yeah, you got a question.
Yes. Tell us a little bit about the Fifth Wave Leadership. What is it that you guys do over there?
Oh, okay. You want me to do that now? Sure. Fifth Wave Leadership, our company is what's called a human capital development firm. Fancy way of saying we work with you to help you have better people, and we do management assessments. How effectively are you managing right now? And then we do development of your people, particularly managers, but eventually everybody, to be more effective in building relationships and making decisions, kind of thing I was talking about earlier. So our goal is to help you have people that are more effective than the competition's people, internally within the company and externally between you and the customers. So your people end up being easier people to work with and much easier people for everybody to deal with. And that's essentially what we do in a nutshell. Okay, good. Thank you.
Thank you, Morrie.
Okay.